want to throw the first question out to all of you, whoever would like to jump in the very first, but I am guessing that each of the four of you has at some time been the only person who looks like you in the room, and I want to know, or in the kitchen, and I want to know what that feels like and how that might have affected you.
I'm always the only person that looks like me in a room, and I'm really used to it. I guess I belong to a lot of minority groups, if you will, and so that made me quite early on just really try to regard myself as an individual. And my drive was always about being seen as an individual rather than being sort of seen as a stereotype. So that's really been kind of my guiding motivation, like it's always there. But I've only just recently joined a board. I've only been on the board of APRA for 4 years, and there was some research out of APRA, and we represent songwriters and get their royalties to them. Where only about 24% of our membership were female or gender non-binary, or it's like songwriting is such a good example of a place where, it should be 50-50.
Yeah, right. Songwriting
stories there's so much missing in songwriting that could be there. So many voices missing. So APRA took it really seriously that we have to take diversity really seriously. So it's really nice to be on a board of a place where they really walk the walk and it matters to them. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Becca, I'm coming to you because you're the next.
Yeah, sure.
When have you felt like you were the only person like you in the room?
Well, I'll first acknowledge that I feel very fortunate to be coming into my own career when many other women had already forged the way. And so we've already heard about a lot of other women in sport. So I'm actually not alone, at least in my current role. When I first started my career, I was in Dubai as a 22-year-old. I was the only woman in the room often. And it was an interesting place to start my career because there the sexism and misogyny is very overt. Wow. And it almost made it easier because I was like, oh, these are the rules. I can learn the rules, play by the game. Whereas in Western culture, or at least in the United States, it's all meant to be a meritocracy, and that's bullshit. And so it was a good place to learn of like, oh, let me operate within the rules where I understand the structure very well. And then when I went back to the States, like, oh, there's some duplicity here, and that people are not always upfront. And even some of my best friends, and it's so ingrained in both women and men. You can't just say it's men. It's all things we all need to unlearn. And so I think in this role, I don't think I've ever been the only woman in the room. And that's largely because I represent women. And when I'm advocating for our players, they are also sitting with me. Yeah. And we also have hired other women. So I feel very fortunate.
Monique, what about you?
Oh, if I had $1 for every time I was the only woman walking into the kitchen, I could probably retire. It's an incredibly male-dominated industry, especially in I hate this term, but fine dining, which is quite Eurocentric as well. So you're not often finding brown women in that sphere. And I used to kind of, if it was, whether it was something to do with a chef conference or a kitchen or walking onto the set where there'd be other chefs and I'd go, oh gosh, it's all dudes again. I used to get kind of nervous and kind of retreat and sort of, because I'm an actually shy person as well. But I've kind of learnt to just go, no, I kind of have this thing I tell myself, no, you belong here, you're just as good, this is just because there's this dynamic that you've kind of grown up in, the kitchen dynamic. Just basically you belong here. But it took a while to kind of teach myself that. And I had a lot of insecurity because of that feeling of being oh, where are the other women? Or, can I do that as fast as that guy? Because there's this kind of underestimation that happens in kitchen towards women. And it's been tricky to navigate, but I'm glad to be here, and representation is everything, and so I'm glad I've stayed the course. But it's definitely had its moments.
Because kitchens are traditionally thought of as the professional ones, not the one at home. Hot, sweaty, shouty, bad language, sharp knives, people throwing things. But a kitchen doesn't have to be like that, right?
It doesn't have to be like that, and I think kitchens are changing. And, you know, when I started out in kitchens, basically when I was like 14, there was definitely more of that attitude. Things are shifting, which is great. And, you know, there's been a lot of like almost like generational trauma that's happened from that. And I'm hoping that like we can all work towards creating calmer kitchens because you actually produce better work that way.
I feel like you get better food out of a calm place, surely.
You do. And I think there's just a lot of things that need to be unlearned. But I think in kitchens, traditionally, where women have kind of been held back, there's been a lot of like unconscious bias. I've seen it myself, and also like you were saying, like I found myself, you know, maybe a decade ago in my younger years as well, also kind of judging people when they'd walk in and kind of go, are they actually going to be tall enough to carry this? Are they going to be able to handle that amount of heat? And it's like, it's not up to me to decide or a man to decide what somebody's capable of. It's up to the person to decide. And, you know, that's something I always try to think about, you know?
Yeah. Say what the job needs to be done and see if they can do it.
Yeah, and I mean, if something's too heavy for a woman to carry, which is a ridiculous statement, then it's probably too heavy to be carried full stop, call work safe, you know? Why, you know, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Becca, can I come to you and then to Theresa? But I want to ask you, Becca, so the whole, I feel like sport has been slow to embrace women from where I'm sitting as a spectator. But you managed to achieve the pay parity thing. How? What is the recipe? What do we do?
Well,
I don't think there's a recipe, and I will say it was long fought by the players, too long fought. We are privileged in the U.S. We have something called Title IX, so many of us that are Americans sitting in this room were benefits of that, myself included. I walked onto a rowing crew team at the University of Texas and did that all 4 years as a varsity athlete that eventually was full scholarship. Like, that was a privilege, and so I think that already sets a foundation in the U.S. where you have a number of people that have had touch points with women athletes, and now they're in business. And there's a lot of statistics around women who have been in some sort of sport, often it's like 90% of the boardrooms or something, or C-suite, have had some sort of experience. So I'm saying this as like background for our own culture within the U.S. And despite that, despite the U.S. women's national team being world champions multiple times over, gold medals multiple times over, which is not a prerequisite to equality, by the way. You should just have equality. They were still struggling to achieve it. And so I was 31 and very naive, and the recipe is this. You have to have people that are willing to fight and go the distance. And I think the naivete for me was like, oh, this will take a year. Took 6 from when I started, 7 when I started with them. And that's the other part. It is a slog. It takes resilience. It takes persistence. It takes just a lot of people in your corner and a bit of luck, if I'm being really honest. I think we did a lot of things within the system, and I'll say this in this room, and I'm sure it'll get out, but like, no, we help people win elections. We help people get fired. We help try to change the structure at the top. And the bit of luck that came in for us is that Cindy Parlow-Cone, who was a 1999 World Cup champion, eventually became the president of U.S. Soccer and helped really change a lot of the structure, because when I first came in, it was 2017. I was 31. I just come from McKinsey consulting firm, and we were talking about this in the back, that I'll put facts in front of them, and surely they will see their own biases, and their own rationale doesn't hold up when they are trying to say why the women don't deserve equal pay, equal working conditions, etc. And instead of it changing hearts and minds, they got really defensive. And
okay.
It was just very combative, and so they just dug in for years and years and years, and so every little inch was a fight. And so it wasn't until the players themselves were brave enough to file a lawsuit. So like, there were multiple. We heard Sarah Gregorius talk earlier. I work very closely with Sarah. She's wonderful, but you have to create leverage points. You have to understand how it's a whole. It is not a linear path, and there's a lot of different pressure points that you're going to need. And some things just lined up very well for us both. The leadership at the U.S. Soccer was willing to actually they said our intention is to achieve equality. And then how do we do it? And that took a bit of time as well. But without that initial step, you're never going to get there. So that's why I go back to the society point, is there has to be some hearts and minds that change. And even in this World Cup, there's so many different countries represented that still don't believe women deserve a place on the pitch. It's a hard place to start from.
Yeah. Yeah, at some point we have to get everybody in some kind of agreement that women belong in all the spaces. Can I come to you, Theresa?
I just want to make a few observations on that. First of all, it starts with language. Who in this room has ever said, oh, New Zealand was the first country in the world to give women the vote? Never say that again. We weren't given the vote. Our foremothers fought for it. And that fight went on for a long time. And so they had male allies. It was an all-male parliament. Kate Shepherd had 2 MPs, both called John, actually, who really helped give her the inside goss and helped with the campaign. She also had a male friend, possibly lover, who was a printer, who was printing all the information. So men are important in any fight led by a woman for women. You need male allies. You do need resilience. You've got to keep going, and you've got to think about the power structure and use what leverage you've got. So in that situation, it was the players. In New Zealand, it's been female representation on sports boards. It wasn't until the government said, you are not going to get the funding that you have been getting unless you have at least you have equal representation on your boards. And that really shifted the dial. So I think we can't be naive about it. Nothing is given. Power is never given up lightly. Although any equality, whether that's in business or sport, actually benefits all of us. The people who are sitting in the most powerful positions, which are usually straight white men, don't all see it that way. They think they're possibly going to lose something. Not all of them, but some. And so you have to be in it for the long haul, and then once it's won, you cannot think that's it for all time. You've actually got to celebrate the having of it, whether it's abortion rights, whether it's being able to vote, whether it's actually owning property in your own name. For those of you in the audience who are young, in New Zealand, women didn't used to be able to own property in their own name. When Māori women married white settlers, they had to give up their land. So all of that has shifted over time. Of course, it has, because women have fought for that. So whatever rights we have won, us and our foremothers, we must carry on celebrating those, because they can easily be taken away if they get taken for granted.
Let's talk about that, because that's one of the things that terrifies me.
Yeah.
As it freaks me out that what we've won doesn't stay won, and I'm looking at Roe v. Wade, obviously, but there are other examples of things that, you know, we have struggled for such a long time, and you think, okay, we're done now, and everybody gets it, and they don't get it, and we're not done, and we have to keep going. Does that cause anxiety for you, Beck?
Oh, absolutely. I've been in my business for more than 25 years, and I've seen the arc now, and like maybe I hadn't known that when I was younger, but yeah, Roe v. Wade is definitely a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so that we celebrate the things that we have achieved, can I find out from each of you, what are the things that feminism has done that has made your life better? You know, how I feel like my life is better than my mother's life in so many ways, but how about you? What's better?
Me? Well, in the words of the great modern philosopher Cardi B, feminism is simple. It means that I can do whatever a man can do.
Yeah.
More or less. And so, like you said, I feel that what feminism has done for me is it's allowed me better and greater opportunities than my mother and my grandmother, which I'm incredibly grateful for, but I do think we have such a long way to go.
Yeah. Becca?
Similar. I mean, my grandmother was in her 50s, and she went back to UCLA and got her PhD in art history and then became a tenured professor. So this is like somebody that was my hero growing up, and I already had big role models in my life, such as what we called her Grandma Fish, to show me that path. And so for me, it was like, oh, of course I can do that kind of thing. It was never a question, and I wouldn't have that without our what do you call our four mothers? Four mothers, or the woman that led us before. And my mother, she's in Wellington. She opted not to come here. She wanted to go to one of your museums, but she she was on the first Stanford women's soccer team, and it was just a product of Title IX, and also this first Stanford women's water polo team. And so she never had the opportunity to play any organized sport growing up. And it wasn't until her collegiate days that she was. And whereas my sisters and I'm the oldest of four with three sisters, we played. They did everything they possibly could to make sure we had whatever we wanted to try. We had that opportunity, and so that first step is just the opportunity to get your foot in the door, and then to see so many women achieve so many firsts. And even for our group of women, like we still have so long for to go, but we should celebrate our progress, and you can see it in the generations. And hopefully, all of you guys up front, like you have the world in front of you, and there's so much that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, fantastic. Beck.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Christchurch in the 80s, and so all my school teachers were really cool, strong, second wave feminists. And so we were really schooled by, like, there was always that, you know, that feeling, and it was really powerful. And it actually wasn't until I left school that I realised that actually the world wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. And so, yeah. And this is a little bit off topic, but just to talk on what you just said about the public supporting, you know, women playing sport and so forth. An argument for diversity in both these industries, music and sport, would be that audiences are diverse, and so too should the people making decisions. Otherwise, you know, lest you not know how to speak to that audience at some point. Yeah.
Education. I mean, you know, it's not that long ago, really. It's in a matter of decades when women couldn't go to university in New Zealand. You know, first woman graduating in medicine, first woman graduating in law, and now look, law firms so focused on diversity and making sure that there's enough women coming through at partner level. So education has completely opened up for women in New Zealand. Actually, business careers, being able to be a CEO, being able to be an entrepreneur. Funding is still harder for women, but it's shifting. It's got better in the last 5 years in that regard. A bit what Monique said, a girl born in New Zealand today can look and say, okay, I could be Prime Minister, or I could be a CEO, because there have been 2 female Prime Ministers in the last 20 years. There are currently several female CEOs, or I can be a racing car driver, of which there are the Kiwi woman global racing car drivers. So I can be whatever it is, my skills and talents and determination, and I'm not going to be blocked because of my gender, or because I didn't go to the right school. Or, you know, it's like New Zealand one of our values is that we want anybody to be able to give it a go, and not just those of us who live in Wellington or Auckland who've got access to more facilities. We want to believe that you can be from the far north, you can be from the East Cape, you can be from Invercargill, and you can still get access to the best healthcare, the best education system, etc. Some of those things are values that we need to hang on to. They are good. They do mark this country in terms of it different from elsewhere in the world, and they're important that we value them.
So if I gave each of you a feminist wand and you were allowed to change one thing about the way the world is at the moment, what would you wish for? What would you wave it for?
Equal pay. The pay gap is still at 9.1% is the pay gap between men and women in New Zealand. It's been stuck at that level for a decade. And that compounds, then women are paid less, they save less, they have less KiwiSaver, and that compounds over the long term to mean that women are poorer in retirement, etc. So my magic wand would be that everybody is fairly paid. That's the big pay gap, but the pay gap for Māori women is bigger than that. 25%. And the pay gap for Pacific women is bigger again. It's close to 30%. So that pay gap is something we look back in the past and we go, hey, there used to be pay gaps. Isn't that a really weird idea?
Yeah, insane. It reminds me, Becca, of, you know, we look at it and we go, that's unreasonable, but we won't do anything about that. But yes, magic wands, feminist wands.
My magic wand, same as Theresa.
Yeah.
Pay equity. Yeah, like that would that would be it. You know, if I had that wand, that would 100%.
Yeah, same. I mean, obviously that's near and dear to what we did, and I think part of the motivation for the U.S. Women's National Team players in doing that was it was not just about themselves, but all industries, all women, all ethnicities, races, etc. And as a white woman, I'm very privileged, and we in our team have equal pay because every player gets paid the same. That is not the case in any other industry.
I'm going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, and without, that's why your achievement is so huge, Becca, because without that equity piece, the diversity conversation is just window dressing. It's not sufficient.
Yeah.
There's lots of organisations want to be seen to be diverse and so forth, but it's sort of performative unless unless it's about the money, really.
I want to put a plug in for affordable childcare and flexible working hours, because I see so many people who want to do the kind of work that I do that's in the evenings, and it's easy for men and almost impossible for women because of childcare.
That would be my number 2 as well.
Yeah.
And the most forward-thinking large companies in New Zealand, one AIA, which I chair, and many others, have all now got parental leave schemes way more generous than what the government requires.
Yeah.
And that might have started with it as a talent, and then to keep talent, needing to keep their woman,
because you
coming
don't want
back.
women who have all this experience to disappear.
Yeah, but that works. So parental leave is definitely number 2.
Yeah, fantastic. And my final question, and do this in any order, don't feel that you have to go along the row, but our final question for everybody that we've had at these events is, what advice would you give to your younger self to thrive?
I would say keep your head up and stay the course, whatever the course is that you've chosen to take. And you're a lot stronger than you think. And if you ever doubt yourself, just say it back to yourself. But also for a young woman, I think probably my biggest bit of advice outside of that is learn to take control of your finances from a young age. Because if you get up to speed with financial literacy and you get to a point where you have financial freedom, then it affords you a lot more opportunities to work outside the system. And I think there isn't enough dialogue with young women about financial literacy and kind of making those smart moves. So that's something that I kind of try to talk to young women about, particularly those who work with myself, and a bit of advice that I wish I was given.
Thank you. Who's next?
I really love this concept of mana, that it's this, it's not a finite thing. You can lose it and you can gain it. So you just always have to keep nurturing that and have, be a person of integrity all the time, no matter what you do. And, don't be afraid to be in spaces, you have every right to be there at all times, and you always are able to put your vibe into places. You have the power to change culture just by talking, to people. You always belong. You can always be there. Yeah.
It's gorgeous. Thank you. Becca.
I'm going to pick up on what you said earlier, Theresa. It's a verb. It's not something that you're looking back on, or it's a noun. I love that you said you had a course that you wanted to stay. I don't really feel like I've had that. So it's really about the journey and being okay with the ups and downs, the weaves. And for me, my younger self, I would go back and say, you're going to be okay. And a lot of what you do will build on it itself. And so when it looks like you're completely swerving into a whole different industry, a lot of those skill sets, like I say, this job is the dream job I never knew I wanted, because it took from so many of my previous experiences and not even career choices, just what happened, and skill sets that I gained and knowledge sets that I've gained that I was then able to draw upon in this role to feel really good, confident, and thrive. So whatever the course might be, it may not be, it's definitely not linear, most likely, and just enjoy it.
Yeah, fantastic.
I guess I'm building on that in a way. I would say to a young person, there are no wrong choices. You cannot make a wrong choice. If you end up working for a good boss, that's great, you'll learn. If you end up working for a bad boss, that's great too, you'll learn. If you end up going to university and you find that you fall in love with that occupation, that's great, but if it's not right, you can change. You've got time on your side, so you can always make another choice. The only choice that's a bit hard to come back from is if you choose the wrong person to have children with early on. That can be a difficult choice.
Even that, you can work your way through that.
You can work your way through that. But so don't get hung up about, I don't know what I should do, because at a professional level, if you are today, in the last year of school, what role or job or how you'll be earning an income when you're my age doesn't exist yet. It hasn't been created yet. So you can't possibly know what is the right choice or the wrong choice for the long term. So I agree with what Beck said. Just focus on what you are good at and what you enjoy. Surround yourself with people who make you feel good. Try and surround yourself with people who've got strengths you don't have, because then that gives you the potential to go into business together or, to do things that one person alone might find hard. And just accept that life's got plenty of opportunity for you to do everything you want, but don't do what I did and have a breakdown in your mid-20s because you thought you had to do it between breakfast and morning tea. You don't.
Fantastic. Thank you, Theresa. There's so much wisdom on the stage, it almost makes me wish that we were recording it so we could watch it all again later. We are. Massive round of applause, please, for Theresa Gattung, Bic Runga, Becca Roux and Monique Fiso. Amazing.